Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for July 17th, 2023. Today we're going to take a dive into the depraved world outlook of the Western oligarchs. It's been now a little more than a week since the NATO summit at Vilnius. Most of the media is saying that despite some tensions, it was an overall success, commitment to continue the war, agreement all around, and the pledge for more money and more arms to Ukraine was successfully obtained by Volodymyr Zelensky. Well, the general recognition internationally is that the Vilnius NATO summit was a flop. Let's review some of what happened there. The tensions came to the surface at times over the continued support for Ukraine, and these tensions dominated backroom discussions. There are the famous photos of a forlorn-looking Zelensky in his Marvel superhero costume standing in the middle of a room surrounded by well-dressed NATO dignitaries where he's left by himself. Now, Zelensky had just done, in the first day, a freak-out attack on NATO for not appreciating what Ukraine is doing. But after that, Biden talked to him, others talked to him, and he was brought to heel. And he was offered more toys and loot to continue the destruction of Ukraine and the leading of Ukrainians to their deaths. So if that's a success, so be it. There was the admission that NATO warehouses are virtually empty, that there's no new ammunitions available, and because of deindustrialization, the replenishing of those ammunitions will take a significantly long time. Also, the question came up, how do you repair the equipment that's already in Ukraine that's been destroyed or damaged? For example, Ukraine's 47th Brigade, which received 99 Bradley fighting vehicles, valued at over $4.3 million each. Out of 99 of them, 28 have been knocked out of commission, and another 24 are in need of immediate repair. The question then came up, how do you repair this equipment? Do you move it via train across Ukraine where it becomes subject to being attacked? Do you build centers in Ukraine to repair it? Well, who's going to do that? Who are the technicians? Where's the power source and everything else that's needed? So you can see slowly but surely the war machine is grinding down. Now, there may be some recognition of the rebellion from the global south, but that's essentially a subject of attack. That who are these ungrateful countries that won't support the war against Russia? Now, there's no push for peace coming from the NATO countries, except a plan for continuing the war to force Russia to submit. And at the same time, the NATO summit took up the discussion of expanding NATO into the Asia-Pacific to confront China. Now, on this question of the global south and the rebellion, there's a very important article in Foreign Affairs magazine, the magazine of the Council on Foreign Relations, titled "The Myth of Neutrality. Countries will have to choose between America and China." It basically says what you'd expect, that there's no middle ground. You have to be with us or against us, the old line of George W. Bush. The author is Richard Fontaine, who's now the CEO of the Center for New American Security, CNAS, which was set up, I think, during the Obama administration. One of its past CEOs was the Witch of Maidan, Victoria Nuland, and Fontaine himself is a former aide to super war hawk Senator John McCain. The New York Times Magazine had a similar kind of article on Sunday titled "An Act of War Inside America's Silicon Blockade Against China." And it says that the U.S., while not doing much to actually increase its technological capabilities so it could compete better, but the article is euphoric over the use of sanctions and economic warfare to undermine China's science and technology. Here's a quote from the article from Emily Kilcrease, who's a senior fellow at the Center for New American Security. She said there are, quote, key areas that China should not advance in, unquote. Is that up to the United States to decide what areas of science China can advance in? But then she lets the cat out of the bag. Here's what she says. Those areas happen to be the areas that will power future economic growth and development. In other words, we must not allow China to develop. That's why there's a revolt from the global south, because the Unipolar Order has no right to dictate to sovereign nations their investment policy, their science policy, and so on. The fact is, China is not developing these technologies to conquer the world or to impose their policies the way the West is doing. So what we see is the irony here. While the U.S. is using green policy and restriction of credit to kill off advances in Western science and technology, it's now openly advocating intervention against China and any other nation that would choose to advance its scientific capability. That is, attacking sovereign nations to reverse their own advances. So we see it was not a mistake what Vice President Harris said in Baltimore over the weekend, where she said that the goal of green policy is to, quote, reduce population, unquote. Later, the wordsmiths of her office came out and said, no, she meant to say reduce pollution. Well, as is often the case with Biden and Harris, who have a hard time communicating, their so-called slips actually reflect their real thinking. And it's up then to their team to make a correction. Well, then we have more signs of dangerous idiocy from NATO. Scott Ritter reports that there was a request at the NATO summit, not in public, but in private discussion, request from the Polish government to station nuclear weapons in Poland under the control of the Polish Air Force crews. This was not publicly discussed. There's a reason for that. This is an extremely dangerous provocation toward a possibility of nuclear strikes against NATO countries. We also have the case of the sore loser, British Defense Secretary Ben Wallace, who announced that he's not merely leaving as defense minister, but as a member of parliament. A sore loser because his bid to replace Jens Stoltenberg as the head of NATO was rejected by the United States. Wallace praised the NATO buildup, especially the buildup of the United Kingdom, warned of the danger from Putin, and he said what he's going to be doing now, he'll turn to watching Formula One and horse racing. Well, while we see this insanity coming from the leading oligarchs from the West, there are some voices of sanity ringing out in the United States. Democratic presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. warned that Biden's calling up of 3,000 reservists is preparation to fight a ground war against Russia. Kennedy said instead of acknowledging the failure of U.S. NATO policy, his administration is preparing to sacrifice American lives too. We also have from Donald Trump, who's far and away the front runner for the Republican nomination for president. Trump added his voice when he said, quote, "We must have peace," unquote. Well, it's time for you to add your voice to this. We can't count on politicians or political leaders to do what's right. The Schiller Institute has been on a full-scale mobilization, which included our July 8th and 9th conference in Strasbourg, France. It also includes the growing role of the Friday discussions of the International Peace Coalition, as we're bringing more and more people from more and more countries into the discussion. But we need more in Western Europe and the United States. You can join by signing and circulating the urgent appeal to the next president of the United States, which I'll link at the bottom of the description section. When leaders demonstrate the lack of reason and respect for human life, it then becomes necessary for the people to intervene. So join our movement to become part of making history for the benefit of mankind and the future of your children and grandchildren. So thanks for joining me today. I'm sorry I wasn't here Friday to take questions. I had a very bad cold, which is still with me a little bit, but I'm much better now. If you have questions, I can take them up during the week this time. So send them to me at harleysch@gmail.com. Questions or comments are welcome. So thank you. See you tomorrow. Hello. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, you'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and Weekly Magazine, which is what I read to stay on top of things.